You know, I was one of the few people in my social circle, as you may put it, that was actually excited for this film. I mean, a lot of the comments I heard from the naysayers ranged from the comments from those who are just resistant to change in general, to some of the more really racist comments. But I was excited for this film for two main reasons. First, the story of Annie, the musical, the comic strip, it's very dated. I mean, it's very much tied to the Great Depression. And that's an era of time that the average viewer nowadays just may not be able to relate to. And yeah, although our economy may not be doing that well, and we do see some aspects of history repeating itself, given that there are some aspects of the musical that may not necessarily be considered politically correct by today's standards, an update probably wouldn't hurt, since it would allow for the more universal themes of the musical to kind of bubble to the surface, to let the more universal aspects of not giving up hope in the face of despair, as well as kind of the kindness of someone who was initially hard-hearted slowly opening his heart to this orphan girl. The stuff like that is what is basically taken into this new updated version of Annie. By updating it and showing that it can work in a new setting, you get to the basically the heart of the story. Now, the second reason why I was excited is that it's nice to actually see a studio take a genuine risk. I mean, our film industry was pretty much getting stagnant as Hollywood studios were getting more and more risk adverse. So it's nice to see a studio not afraid of change, not afraid of taking an actual risk, and not afraid to actually do something different. Of course, it probably helps when you have Jay-Z and the Fresh Prince in your corner to help you out. The film has a bit of a rough start since it immediately begins with lampshading the fact that this isn't the Annie that we all know and love. Except the way they do it is almost a bit mean-spirited. It's like the people making this film are saying, hey, you want Annie the old way, the way you remember? Too bad, this is our version. It's also kind of quick and almost desperate to establish that this is a modern identity, a modern take on Annie, and that's really visible in the film's overture, as you get a lot of the hip-hop beats as it's going over the songs of the musical that we're all familiar with. Another problem is that this film kept making a lot of jokes about how weird it would actually be if people suddenly started bursting into song and dancing in the middle of the street. Sometimes it was interesting because they did it a little bit before the musical numbers or did it a little bit after, and the early two jokes were okay, but then they started implementing that humor in the middle of musical numbers. And not even in a way that made it work, that kept the thing going, but in a way that just basically broke the flow and even broke the continuity of those scenes. And the chief offender is in this film's version of Easy Street. It's almost like the director was ashamed of the fact that he was making a musical, because some of the cinematography just doesn't mesh well with the musical numbers that we're seeing. And there's even some moments where during a musical number, we're being shown some of these sight gags involving characters that aren't actually singing, that aren't actually dancing, taking away from the people that actually are singing, that actually are dancing, kind of in a fashion similar to the animated version of The King and I. The sense of shame is further exemplified when you look at the scenes that are leading up to the songs that are from the original Broadway musical, because the way the dialogue is written and how it leads into it, it feels almost like you're watching a concert and you have the impresario saying, next you're going to be here, A Hard Knock Life. Next, you're going to be here, I Think I'm Going to Like It Here. Next, you're going to be here, now we're on Easy Street. And really, it was kind of a case of, you don't have to say the song title when you're leading up to the song. The song title is pretty much the chorus, and so it was just kind of the case that they're just like, okay, well, we've got to remind the audience that these are songs from the original Broadway musical. And the reason why this bothers me is because they don't do this for any of the moments that are actually the original songs, the ones that were specifically composed for this film. Those ones get more of a subtle buildup, but even then, there's still that sense of shame that's built into the way this film is shot and edited. I find it kind of sad because there are some really strong elements here, particularly when it came to the acting and even some of the musical numbers. The two best numbers, at least in my opinion, in this version of the musical, are Tomorrow and Little Girls And Little Girls actually kind of surprised me, but the reason why I like these two numbers is because they actually use the cinematography to reinforce the song. Like, the way that those sequences are shot actually works with what the songs are actually about, with what the characters are effectively talking about. Now, the reason why Little Girls kind of surprised me is because I was kind of worried when I saw that Cameron Diaz was going to be playing Miss Hannigan. But coming out of it, a lot of the moments that had me worried when it comes to Cameron Diaz's more recent roles, particularly with how they're so desperate to convince us and remind us that she's still sexy, those aspects of those roles that she's played in recent years actually work really well with the character of Miss Hannigan. They work well to fuel the kind of the ego she has, the fact that she sees herself as a bit of a diva, the fact that she was going to be a star, but then life just didn't turn out the way it did. A lot of that works really well when you look at kind of how Cameron Diaz has almost kind of this persona where she's still trying to convince us that she's still sexy. It works really well, almost like it's a perfect fit. Now I actually have a bit of a hard time imagining anybody else playing that role in this particular version. Overall, I still found myself really enjoying this film despite its flaws. The music sounded really good, to the point where I actually might want to pick up the soundtrack, and the actors turned in some really good performances. What ultimately hurts it, though, is the constant winking and nudging to the audience saying, hey, this is a musical completely different from source material, but isn't it weird how these people suddenly burst into song? It's just kind of sad, because if they just embraced the fact that they were making a musical, the film would have been a lot more, well, it would have been a lot stronger. I don't know if this attempt to have it feel more real is their way of trying to emulate Tom Hooper and his approach with Les Miserables, but it's the basic Batman argument. What may work with one film and with one musical isn't going to work the same way with another musical. So really, they just needed to embrace the fact that it's a musical and just have fun with it, instead of constantly winking and nudging and breaking the fourth wall to the audience and pointing out how weird it is that these people are suddenly bursting into song. It's kind of a case of, well, it's a musical. If by constantly breaking and acknowledging that, you're kind of breaking the suspension of disbelief. Other than that, this is definitely a film that families will enjoy if they're willing to look past some of the more desperate parts of it. All of that said, Annie gets a 4 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.